Hello everyone, Professor Giles here again, and we're going to look at the early Renaissance in Europe. This is chapter 8, and it's a big chapter, so I may have to divide this up into two segments. I could fly very quickly through it, but not really be able to give much more information than what's in the book. And there are a few things here that I want to take some time just to explain it so you understand process and what was going on at the time. So we may have to divide this into two. We'll see about that. Okay, so let's talk about the setup of Europe at this time. Just give an overview. By now you know I love maps. I like to show where things are going on, and just real short, something to look at here. Early on we're going to talk about this area here, especially in the Flanders area, which is today the Low Countries, Belgium and so forth up here, the Dutch area, down into Burgundy, which is now present-day France. But we're also going to look at artwork here from Florence, down in Italy. And just in reference, there's Rome. And what's in between these two areas? It's the Alps, okay? The European Alps really separate Europe itself from Italy, and that is a barrier between art and knowledge. Now, it's not like nothing can go across, because there was certainly all kinds of information go back and forth and trade and all. But just understand that art that would get created up in the north really didn't make its way down into the south, and vice versa. It would take quite a while for that to happen. So let's talk about the hallmarks of early Renaissance and Northern Europe. I'm calling this Northern Renaissance. The book doesn't necessarily call it that. I like to divide it up that way. The text is doing more Europe versus Italy. I'm going Northern because it is Northern Europe. So a new technology is coming, and it's oil paint. To us today, oil paint is everywhere. At this time, the technology for painting before would have had to have been painting on plaster, which we call fresco, onto wet plaster, or egg-based paints, tempera paint, and other technology where your paint is crushed up, your color, your pigment is crushed up and put into another substance to carry it. Well, it's somewhat similar here, but the substance that we're putting it in is not egg yolks or egg whites, it's oil, okay? Normally, it's linseed oil. And what this allows is, instead of like fresco where you have to paint onto the wet surface and it dries and you can't do anymore, here you can take weeks and weeks and weeks to paint something, because the oil will stay wet from day to day to day. And it really doesn't matter on humidity either. So you can have a dry climate, you can have a wet climate, and you still use the oil paint. So it really is a new technology. And what does that bring? It brings more vivid colors and more freedom to go and create more intense detail. Okay? And during this time, we also see a lot more artistic freedom, especially because of the Protestant Reformation going on. Instead of being tied down to what the church says art needed to be, now it's citizens, everyday people asking for artwork. Because there's this burgeoning class, middle class, if you want to call it that, with money now, due to the freedom that's going on during this resurgent Europe. Now we can have all kinds of subject matters going on. It doesn't have to be just political or church artwork. And then a true reemergence of true realism is going on. Okay, so let's take a look here. One of the prime artists that we see and really one of the first artists that we really know his name. Yeah, some of the ancient Greek artists, we know their names, but very few. But now this is really a turning point where we really see artists who are dedicated to their craft, and we know exactly who they are and more about them. And one of the prime pieces that we see with Van Eyck is the Ghent altarpiece. Okay, it's an altarpiece, we'll say similar to the giant altarpieces that we saw by Cimabue, except this is much larger. The height of this is about the same, but what happens is this is a seam down here, and each of these panels on this side is a door and on that side is a door. So here we see that it's closed. Notice the detail work. This is oil paint, so he could take weeks and weeks and weeks to work just on that face, just on this face. And these are the people who donated the money to have this piece created. So more than likely they're very, very wealthy, and they're giving this piece to their local parish as a devotional piece. Okay. We won't go into all the details. This you've seen before when we were talking about the elements of art, and this is with it open. So we have that wing or door, this wing and door. So we see Adam and Eve on left and right at the top, the angels in a choir and an orchestra playing instruments, John the Baptist, rough face, rough clothing underneath, but then he has this very luxurious robe over the top. Mary, the mother of Jesus. I'll show you an up close detail of that. And then a representation of God the Father here with a crown, with this arch above his head, almost like a halo. And down below we have 4 different segments of people coming from all of Christendom. Soldiers and church people and normal people, all coming to give adoration to the Lamb who's on an altar. So this is Jesus, a representation of Jesus as a lamb on the altar who's been slain. Once we look at another altar piece here, more detail, but there's a chalice here and blood is going into it. Can't really see it here though. If you've seen the movie or read the book, Monuments Men, this is a primary quote character in that movie. And it is just one of the great pieces of Western art. They make a big deal of it in that movie, but if this would have been destroyed, it really would have taken away part of Western culture. It really is, I'm almost speechless talking about what a great piece of artwork this is. Now another piece that Van Eyck created, very, very different. Again, it's oil paint. This is on wood, so you have a wood panel as opposed to painting on canvas like what we would think of today. I just have to take a moment here and say that when we went over the elements of art for the voice thread, I just loved your answers because you were seeing what this is about, how it's constructed, the light and the dark, details about it that were just wonderful. I'll delve into a little bit more here. The book does a pretty good job, but I want to show you some details. Van Eyck does a great job of creating texture. Look at the fur on this robe and the body of the robe versus the textile here of her dress. Now, a lot of people are thinking, okay, she's pregnant and as bride, they're actually getting married here. Why is she pregnant? Actually, and there are records that she was not pregnant during this time. If you look at her, she is tilting her head, has her hand out, other hand over her belly, and her head is covered. She has these attributes of Mary, and she's wearing blue. And if you look at other artwork, Mary would have green on. So actually, she is being more like the Virgin Mary than she is that she's pregnant. She just has the gathering up here. And if you look here, all this fabric has been pulled up to her belly. And it's sort of like a way of saying that we hope that we're fruitful with children. Now, a lot of students say that they look creepy. Now, maybe this is a good representation of what the guy looked like or not. I don't know. Can't really tell. But Van Eyck is a wonder at creating realism. Is it photographic? No. But he is creating light and dark and using shading, creating textures, creating fabrics. One thing that this painting is known for is symbolism. Okay, the symbology used here is just out the door. Everything has meaning. From their shoes being off, this is holy ground because it's a wedding. Attributes of the Virgin Mary, that they're wealthy, and they were. He was actually from Florence, but here he is living in Northern Europe, and he's a tradesman, or not a tradesman, but he's in trade. And now let's look at this on the wall. This is where Van Eyck signed it. On the wall, floating there, is Johannes de Eyck Fuit Hick. Johannes van Eyck was here. And then the date. And then below that, we have a mirror. And this is really showing the affluence of these people, because mirrors were very rare at the time. And this is a convex mirror where the mirror is rounded out like a ball or a half ball. And then look at the detail here. We have the Stations of the Cross, the story of the passion of Christ, from being on the cross to being beaten, carrying his cross, being taken down from the cross and being carried away. But then in the mirror, there's Onolfini, there's his wife, and there's two other people here. One would probably be a priest or a churchman, and then the artist in the back. So it's actually a self-portrait, and very likely this is a document of the wedding, that this is almost an official document. Oh, I didn't show you this detail. Here's Mary up close in detail from the other piece. And there's that one. Okay, real quick here, and we will have to divide this up, is the Grunwald Crucifix, or the crucifixion portion of the Eisenheim altarpiece by Grunwald. This may very well be on your midterm, as others with this star on it could be. Here it is open, and this is an altarpiece like the Ghent altarpiece where there are wings, and these are wings that shut during certain times, and there's actually another one that would close. This is not open all the time to show this image of Christ on the cross. The things I want to show you here are the details. There's the lamb with a slit in his throat, and he's catching the blood in the chalice. Very Catholic, because the blood of Christ is so pure and so important to the dogma of the church that none can be wasted. Okay, the realism of the body here, the wounds here, almost every inch of his body has a wound in it. And then that opens up on certain feast days. That opens up to show this, where we have the Annunciation, Mary finding out she'll become pregnant, the birth of Christ, and then here, seemingly out of place, is the resurrection. And the resurrection really is this glorious image. I always tell people it looks more like a album cover from the 60s, sort of psychedelic here, as he's lifting off and he's radiating this light, but it really is this glorious image of victory of Christ coming out from the tomb. And we'll talk about the rest of this later.